There it is.
Oh goodness, yeah, Bruce, we're recording. We haven't worn ourselves out yet with talking to each other. So I think even a few people listened last week.
Right?
Yeah. Anyway, we decided, yeah, what would be kind of be an interesting thing to talk about that is a little bit more pleasing to the ear. And one of the things was, one of the reasons that I don't know what's one of the reasons we got into advertising, or one of the benefits we certainly enjoyed, and that is you get an awful lot of free food and drink.
Yes, you do.
And
Yes, you do.
even in the early stages, when you couldn't really afford a really good suit of clothes,
Right.
or even for your own groceries, there was always that opportunity for some really great food and drink, and through that, rubbing elbows with some pretty interesting people. So,
Yes.
let me throw it your way first in terms of, what are some of those interesting circumstances and some of those interesting people that somehow, when you woke up in the morning, you said you had no idea you were going to be rubbing elbows with them.
Well, it's such a wide variety, actually, in truth. You know, Clearly, my first exposure to this was an assistant media planner at SSC&B Lintos, now God knows what. But and a sales rep invited me to lunch at the insistence of my boss at the time, and it was Playboy magazine. And I go out to lunch with them, and the rep has with him a very attractive woman who's probably 24 or so. And she's got an issue of the magazine with her, and she's taking me through the magazine. And when we get to the pictorial, it's clear that she's the centerfold that month, and she personally signs it for me. So now, you don't know whether to be thrilled, embarrassed, aroused. I mean, but you are drinking at lunch, which was another thing they did back then. And I can remember coming back from that lunch, having had one or two many drinks, and basically figuring out how to hide for half a day. But it was truly my first exposure to the kind of perks that may come your way at all levels.
Well, it's funny. It was definitely much more of a drinking culture. Some of that Mad Men stuff is kind of true, and but you got a lot of great work done, and a lot of people had your back too. Your story about Playboy, I'm reminded of Penthouse would come and pitch the different media people and account executives at the agencies, and they too would bring their centerfolds. And everyone would pretend that this all business and so forth, and that this is just another meeting. But the moment they left, you'd all get together and say, "You believe that? You just see
Yeah.
that?" Just crazy. I mean, stuff today you'd probably get, you wouldn't even think about doing some of these things. And I remember working
It
on.
would probably be it would probably be considered inappropriate harassment at this stage.
Well, it would. And I remember the first account I worked on was the Seagram business. And my boss taking me out to lunch, and I'm all from my first day, and I'm all sorts of nervous. And he goes, "Listen, we're going to go out to lunch a couple of days a week. You always order a Seagram product." He goes, "And this is how it works." He goes, "You don't look at the menu until you're halfway through your second drink, and the third drink comes with your meal. And God forbid, if you ever don't order a Seagram specific product when a client is here, that could be a loss of a job." Now that sounds, I mean, I think back on that. Now, I thought at the time he was about 50 something years old because his face looked like a subway mat, but he was like 32. But he was a great guy. And again, he did incredible work, but
See,
days are long gone.
Speaking of Seagram's business, John Scott, if you're alive out there, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
That was Myers he ran, and when I was at Estee, what a wonderful guy. But again, all the guys on Seagram's had a look. a
Well,
florid.
they had a look, and it was a very interesting, empire. Because I remember our ad agency, Edgar Bronfman, who at the time was the CEO of the whole empire, did a lot of fundraising for the UJA, the United Jewish Appeal. And I remember as this lowly account executive going to this opulent event at the St. Regis with, I mean, it looked like a Christmas tree of booze bottles all over the place. And then it came up time for the bidding and the contributions. And I figured, oh, maybe I give $10 or something. And then I realized, shut your mouth, because Edgar Bronfman kicked off the pledges with, I'm going to kick off the pledges with $950,000. And I'm thinking, how did I get into this world? It's terrifying and kind of cool at the same time, but I'm get to drink this great stuff and have this great food. How did this happen?
Well, and you realize that, early in your career, that was a tease for the hard work coming.
Oh, yeah.
How many times did you spend the whole night in the office?
I was told, be prepared to be working overnight pretty much for 2 months straight during planning time.
It's just, they worked us like dogs.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, and for no money back then. And that was the reward. I mean, really, it was, okay, eat at this restaurant, and it'll be another 10 years before you make enough to go on your own.
On your
I mean, and all your meals were like that. Lunches, dinners. I can remember having to wait for cab money to pick up my dry cleaning. Because in those days, you got supper money and you got cab money to get home late at night.
Right.
You're going home at 2 or 3 in the morning. Of course, the least they can do is spring for a cab. But they didn't give you cash ahead. You had to lay it out, and you were making nothing. And I can still remember thinking, oh man, if my cab money doesn't come today, I'm going to be wearing this same set of clothing tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. But kind of fast forward a little bit. We got to work together, not only as agency client, but also at the same client for a number of years. And especially when you went out to different meetings on the West Coast. And I think I recall you and I being at one particular bizarro experience in Los Angeles at a restaurant called Mateo's. So you go give your perspective on it.
Mateo's, this is, Frank. It was supposedly a favorite of Frank Sinatra's. And we went there, and it was a kind of old world, red banquettes, 1950s red sauce place that you would expect to see somewhere in the New York, Boston area, but it was transplanted to LA, first of all, just to set the scene.
Yeah, it was, literally.
Yeah. And then you go in, and by the way, the food was good. It was quite good, but there's this big table right near the entrance that you go by when you're being seated, and it's all celebrities of one sort or another, but it transcends time. So you have Red Buttons and Gary Busey sitting together having dinner at this big round table. There's people on oxygen at this table, literally.
Yeah, and it was Milton Berle and was there. He was alive at the time, and Sid Charisse.
Yes. But the great part was, they actually, a couple of them went, as partway through our meal, and started walking from table to table, introducing themselves and asking where people were from and doing the kind of work in the room. And at that time, I was smoking cigarettes, and I went outside because it was LA. In New York, I think you still could smoke inside, but in LA, you couldn't smoke inside. So I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and Gary Busey comes out, and it's one of my greatest memories because he was like the character in all the movies. He was over the top with the hand gestures and the big teeth and the smile and everything else, and wanted to know if he could have a cigarette. I was like, sure. And we hung out and talked. And I just remember thinking, wow, he's a little crazy, but he's a really nice guy.
Yeah,
But it's like one of those random moments that never would happen. Or what about that place up in Malibu?
Joffrey's.
Oh,
Yeah, where we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm
great
looking up
food.
and I see Valerie Bertinelli kind of
Yes.
by, and then I'm thinking, well, if she's nearby, I wonder if. And then a few minutes later, Eddie Van Halen walks through, all rushed, almost looking like he had to park the car himself or something.
Right.
Just bizarro stuff. I remember being at a shoot at the Shutters in Los Angeles, we eating there, and then all of a sudden I'm looking, I'm saying, wow, who's that guy? The long ponytail. It's Willie Nelson. Paying cash, by the way, because he had no credit. But and I turn around and there's Christopher Lloyd. So, it's almost like you're in one of those places where the cartoons on the walls of celebrities come to life. And it just kind of surrounds you with it, which is really interesting. But didn't you also once say you were at the Lowe's in Santa Monica and James Gandolfini was at the pool or something, and you were
not James Gallagher.
Gallagher.
Yeah. Actually, his wife and kids were there. He was out.
James Gandolfini stuff.
I'm trying to think where I was. I think we were in Florida.
Yeah.
And I ended up walking down the beach and hearing the voice and turning around and him turning and saying, yeah, it's me. Hello. So his voice was more recognizable to me at that time than him until I turned around.
Which is kind of scary, knowing that you were being followed by James Gandolfini, and hopefully it was him and not the character he's playing. Which I think I want to bring up one more example, and I think it also is the night that we might have saved your life from mafia people. And you're looking at me like, what are you talking about? This is the Saloon in Philadelphia. I don't even know if that's still open, but fabulous Italian place. Certainly not light on your wallet, that's for darn sure. And of course, you're eating with our good friend Joe Gerace from the Wall Street Journal. Another example of us never having to pay for our own meal. Anyway, there was a table full of the boys, and there was a bunch of guys. They had either just committed a bad act or they were going to be committing a bad act, because they're all sitting there. There's the older guy and a bunch of younger guys with a bunch of women that were, that those women were not, I won't say anything.
They're brides.
They were not their brides. And now I have enough Italian in me to know when to be more discreet. And Joe Gerace is 100% Italian. So he knows super what we're looking at. But you decide to get up and start walking to the table, and we're going, what are you doing? And I swear to God, Bruce, those guys start looking at you, and I think one of them started putting his hand in his, underneath where the gun is. And you said, I'm just interested in what they're eating.
Yeah, I wanted to see because they never stopped bringing that table food. There had to be 20 platters on that table. The only thing that would have made it more stereotypical if some of the women were feeding the men. But
yeah, we're just reinforcing all sorts of tropes.
We're horrible.
There's
going to be litigation now.
So now you can't do any of this stuff. So why even bother going in the ad business?
Right. Wow. I mean, but I will say, what is the one event? We'll close it out with this. It's nice to be, but the one event that a magazine or some media or somebody threw that you still remember to this day as being a spectacular event and are grateful to them to this day that they included you?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I think that, it's a few of them. And it's back when Time Inc. was actually Time Inc. And some of the other news publications, and getting to go, as you did too, to a couple of the White House press correspondence dinners.
Yeah.
And not so much the dinner itself with all those people. I mean, that was one year with Bill Clinton's talking and Paula Corbin Jones is at one of the tables. But the events that they would have to bring different people from different companies to hear from some of the senior editors and talk about what's really going on in America and the world. And I got so far much more nourishment from those kinds of meetings that I would able to be utilized back at my work. All the other stuff, that's all fun and games, and that's part of the joke. And, those are a minor part of the actual so-called work, those fun things. But those kinds of events, to be able to be part of it, pretty darn special.
Yeah, and they made those truly spectacular learning experiences that made you better people, better business people, better husbands and fathers. There's no question. Some of those things were just nourishment for the soul as well as the mind. Absolutely.
Absolutely. How about yourself? Any one in particular?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed that wasn't what came to mind the first time when I asked the question. The thing that popped into my mind when I was asking you that question is the Brooklyn Bridge's, I guess it was 100th or 200th anniversary. I'm not even sure which it is. I guess it's 100th. It was its 100th birthday. And People magazine took all the low-level assistant media people and media planners and assistant media planners, and they took over the top 2 layers of the World Trade Center at that time. So the indoor observation deck, and back then the outdoor observation deck. So to watch, and they had food from all the different countries that workers were from that had built the bridge. They had slides going of the bridge's construction. And then when the fireworks happened, you're really close to it there. But the fireworks came up and then exploded at you.
Nice.
And I never had that perspective. And I still remember it to this day. And I'm still grateful to the Time Inc. and the People magazine folks, because they included all the low-level people at that time. All the big shots were going out on boats on the river and stuff. Or we're going to be right on the promenade there in Brooklyn Heights and stuff. And we were it was like the first big event. And I was feeling very left out. And then that People magazine invite came. And I remember thinking how grateful I was for it. Well, and what a spectacular night.
And you know what? You hit on something really interesting, because anybody listening to some of this or watching it could think, oh, okay, here it is, guys getting these special treatment and so forth. A lot of the things we talked about, especially earlier in the career, were extremely low-level people. And these media operations made sure that very junior people were invited to a lot of these programs, that it wasn't just sort of this exclusive group overall. And it made sense. It made sense. It intrudes you to the bid. You got rewarded a little bit. They knew you were working your tail off, and also benefited them because they knew that over time most of us were going to grow and would have a fond place in our hearts for them and always be great. I mean, look at it. We're remembering these now. So that does make sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
All right, man.
Hey, listen, have a great day.
I want to go have some really great Italian food now and have a drink, except now I got to pay for it myself. Take care.
Be good, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.